Okay, thanks, Councillor Durham. I'll hand across to you.
Thanks, Shirley. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Economy and Resources Scrutiny Committee on this day, the 10th of September. I hope everybody is well. We're obviously live streaming during the meeting. Obviously, if you do want to ask a question or make a comment, then do please raise your virtual hand. Okay, so we start with item number 1 on the agenda, which is the introductions and attendance at meetings. And Shirley, if you just help me with this in terms of a roll call.
Yep, will do. If you could just confirm that you are present when I call out your name, please. I've got Councillor Barch, who I don't think is here at the moment. Councillor Boddy.
Here.
I've got apologies from Councillor Cruddas. Councillor Durham, obviously you're here. Councillor Harker.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Linda Hughes.
Here.
Councillor Doris Jones.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen, we've got apologies from. Councillor Paley.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Renton.
Here.
And Councillor Tate.
Morning, Shirley. Yes, I'm here.
Morning. And just to go through the officers, I think at the minute we've got Ian Williams, Director of Economic Growth.
Yes.
Elizabeth Davison, AD Resources.
Yes.
Ian Miles, Assistant Director, Central Shared Services.
Yes.
Chris Oates, ICT Strategy and Operations Manager.
Yes.
Pip Rayner, Systems Strategy and Development Manager.
I'm here, Shirley, thanks.
Thank you. And Lee Downey, who is Complaints and Information Governance Manager.
Yes.
And I think that's everybody, but we may well have another officer joining us when it comes to the item that he's going to present. But I think I've got everybody there. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Shirley. Moving on to agenda item number 2, which is declarations of interest. Does anybody want to express an interest in any of the items on the agenda? Okay. Well, it doesn't seem to be. I will just declare an interest in agenda item number 8, being a ward councillor for Brinkburn and Favourdale and a resident of Highgrange. Okay. On to agenda item number 3, which is to consider the minutes of this scrutiny committee for the meetings on the 9th of July and the 16th of July. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes? Does anybody want to make any comments? Councillor Hughes? Just want to turn your mic on, Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, just to record that, yeah, agree with the minutes, and I'd like to raise a matters arising under the 16th of July, please.
Okay. Right, okay. Just go back to that, apologies. Okay. Do you want to go further on that, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, it's under the COVID update, and firstly around the on page 2, page. Actually, it's confusing. That page 4 at the top about the 75 pence in the pound that we're going to be reimbursed from government. I just wonder if have we actually had this, or is this yet, or and how is it going to be built in, and when we'll be getting it? Is it going to be sort of at the end of what's perceived to be the COVID period, or is it something that we're getting on a monthly basis? And also, I understand that the pay award of 2.75% has been agreed, and in the budget we allowed for 2%. So obviously, this is going to put an extra pressure on the budget, and how that will actually impact going forward on our budget as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Sorry. Am I okay to put this one up, Chair?
Yes, please, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor. So the 75 pence in every pound, the details of how we can claim that have just come out, and we've got to put a claim in for April to July by the end of September. So officers are working on that now. There will be a claim, we believe, every month. Well, there'll be 3 claims this year. After that, and then there'll be a reconciliation at the end of the financial year. So I would suspect when we put our claim in at the end of September, the government have been quite quick at actually paying the money through. So I would anticipate that we'd receive that quite quickly after the end of September. But yes, we're working on that now. With regard to the pay award, the 2.75%, yes, we thought that might be the case in the Q1 budget management report that went to Cabinet in July. So we built an extra 400,000 in for that, and you'll see that in the Q1 report. So it's actually been accounted for this year because we thought that that's what would be agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay. So insofar as those questions and comments, I propose to move the minutes. Have I got a seconder? Oh, Councillor Harker, sorry. Want to raise a quick question?
Thank you. It was just in connection with the question that Councillor Hughes has asked. Do we know yet what the end date is of that scheme, the reimbursement of loss of expenditure? Has that been indicated by government as yet, or is it just at this point in time open-ended?
They've said that it is a scheme that will run for this financial year, but I hadn't heard about next year. So at the moment, I'm assuming it will be all losses to the end of the financial year, so the end of March 2021.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. Thank you, Elizabeth. So I propose to move the minutes. Have I got a seconder?
Seconded.
Okay. Just like to raise your virtual hands, just so we can see who's in agreement. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so if we move on to agenda item number 4, which is a presentation on Darlington Borough Council and Microsoft 365. Now, members will be aware, and it's been duly noted by the public, insofar as, you know, how were the council able to mobilise their workforce during COVID. And if I'd just like to hand over to Philippa Rayner.
Hello everybody, good morning. I'm hoping that you can see the presentation on my screen, on your screens that I've just popped up to share. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. So my name, for those of you that don't know me, is Pip Rayner, and I work as part of Elizabeth's team as the System Strategy and Development Manager for Darlington Borough Council. So I have responsibility for our corporate IT systems, and part of my job involves me working closely with colleagues at Zentral to look at the assets that we've got and how we kind of move them forward. So I'm going to run through this presentation with colleagues from Zentral. Please feel free to ask any questions or indeed save them till the end. We're going to do it between us. So I'll move through the slides and Chris and Ian will chip in. But if there's anything that's not clear at any point, please do give me a shout. Is that okay? Okay. I'm going to move to Chris.
Thanks, Pip. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Oates, the ICT Strategy and Operations Manager, working at Zentral. I report to Ian Miles. We need to go back a little bit before COVID, just to set some kind of foundations of why we were able to react as quickly and as well as we did. And it really starts with the investment that Darlington Council made in Microsoft 365. The major component of Microsoft 365 is Office 365. You may remember the classic Office suite, which consisted of Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, and a few other applications. The key thing when considering investment in Microsoft 365 is it's much bigger than that. And that's what the slide on the screen is showing you a little bit right now. Hopefully you can see a few familiar things on there around Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint, and a few newer things around OneDrive that we've rolled out across the council, and then obviously Teams that we're using at the moment. A plan's been agreed with Darlington, the SIG group, to roll out the remainder of the applications that you see on the screen there. I'm not going to bore you by going through all of them. And we're going to be doing that as Central ICT in collaboration with the System Strategy and Development team, and as well as strong input from Leeds Downey and Information Governance, because clearly there are lots of opportunities for Chris in there. Yeah,
Chris, sorry, could I just interrupt? Just one of the committee members has commented. Would we be able to see these slides in full screen?
Yes. Is that not
what's going to cause you a problem?
Is that working in full screen?
That's in full screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Is everybody happy with that?
Apologies, that was my fault.
No.
User error.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting. Thank you.
No, fine. We can probably share this at the end as well, so people can zoom in things if you want to see a bit more detail. Yeah, so we're going to be rolling out the rest of the stuff on that slide, working with PIP's teams, System Strategy, and also working with Leeds Downey Information Governance teams. There's lots of opportunities for increased efficiency and business change in every single one of those boxes that you see on the screen. And further details will be kind of published as we roll those out. Obviously, we're putting in a training package and a support package for people, because there's lots of new stuff to learn. But to really get the value out of it, it needs to be a supported package. Next slide, please, Pip. Is it not working?
Just give me 1 second, I'm just moving it on.
Thanks. So the next slide, when it loads, is going to be around what does Office 365 do for Darlington? Lots of jargon on that slide, but the main point that I wanted to make really, there was the Office suite is a huge part of our productivity suite and our kind of efficiency changes that we'll be making as we move through the programme, but it's not the be all and end all. And a lot of what you see on there was kind of the basis and the foundations that allowed us to respond so fast when COVID hit. We needed to mobilise rapidly. Microsoft 365 includes lots of things that are a little bit intangible, but I'll try to bring some of them to life so you can understand what they are. The big thing was, obviously, everybody that works for the council had the ability to use Microsoft Teams from day one. Everybody was licensed, and we could just switch that on and make that available. The second thing was, different to other local authorities in some cases, everybody had the ability to work from home with their bit of kit. Our remote access solution enabled us to scale rapidly at pace when people started working from home, and that was included within Microsoft 365 license suite in terms of the way in which we securely accessed network from home, and in terms of the encryption of the machines. That meant all of our data was safe in just taking machines from home. Next slide, please, Pip.
Okay, so I think with this one, it's important that we kind of pick up, as Chris has said, back to kind of 2018, when we really started to think about how we were going to utilise Microsoft Office 365, because we didn't really have a choice. We had to go down this route for licensing reasons, keeping up reasons. We would have had packages that were not supported. So we started to do some, and this is before anybody knew COVID existed. It's important to remember that we pulled together an architecture plan that really put the building blocks in place for the foundations for 365. So this is where kind of my team and Chris's team started to work together at quite a low level. There was nothing big bang about this, just to look at what we needed to do.
Yeah, I think one of the key things there was one of our design principles in our IT systems architecture is maximum flexibility and scalability, and that runs as a theme from the ICT strategy through to the vision, through to the delivery of Office 365. So this slide's taken from a presentation I delivered to chief officers earlier in the year. The bit there for people to go through. Okay, so on here, the first 3 points are really around making information accessible, and that is really to aid decision making of officers, making sure that they have the right information at the right time when they need it. The fourth point on there is, I think, is particularly important for me as a technologist, in that we really want to be providing the best ICT systems possible to enable that we can attract and retain the best talent to work for the organisation. Which kind of leads me on to the next point. Our investment in Microsoft 365 was £300,000 per year, which is a phenomenal amount of money. Breaking it down, what that means is that my team, working with Pip's team, need to increase productivity for each user by £180 per year. But just as a reminder, we managed to get phenomenal pricing on that from Microsoft. The list price of Microsoft 365 was £480,000, and that was just for the Office component. That didn't include the extra things that it provided, the security and mobility during the COVID crisis. But through very strong negotiation with Microsoft and the way in which we've architected our ICT systems meant that we could drive that down from £480,000 to £300. And now the fulfillment piece is to drive the value out of that contract. There's certainly a number of things in that suite that can replace existing technologies, and therefore save some of that money going forward. So that the entire contract is packed with value, and we've got a really strong delivery plan now to roll out the additional features and capabilities, and along with Pip's team. And the final point on there is kind of the utopia of overlaying all of that good information architecture with some artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve decision making. When we look at the advancements of Power BI and reporting, management reporting, the impact it's having in some social care settings and the capabilities there, it's a really exciting area for us going forward. And again, we'll be working with Philippa's team in the system strategy group closely on that point. Thanks, Pip.
I think it's probably important to say that from the business point of view, what we did back in 2018 was work with Go to Systems and Information Governance Group, which is our chief officers group, and look at, moving ahead with the purchase. We had to make this upgrade and purchase, and what we were going to do in order to make it deliver. So it sits nicely alongside the Digital Darlington and the Digital First group that's chaired by Paul, and kind of how we move forward and digitalise our services where possible, never forgetting that we need to keep the offer available for everybody. So what can we use this application for to do that? And we started to build, and use the term enterprise architecture. Whilst the technology is exceptionally important, we need to start to look at it from a user point of view, from the public point of view, from our residents' point of view, and kind of how this can enable our services. We had a very clear steer early on that this was not to be a big bang approach, and fully kind of supported by me driving this forward for the organisation and the work done with Systems and Information Governance Group. And we couldn't do it that way because it would have been very resource hungry. We would have had to kind of target resource at specific things. So we wanted to do it very carefully by laying the foundations for this purchase and making sure that we were doing the right thing. So that's kind of what we did. So when that agreement was then gained, we moved into 2019. Everybody was quite happy. We were moving along, and we made quite a few changes technically. So the guys at Central made changes that you would never have seen, that we kind of talk about in this slide. So stuff that kind of happens that was actually really good proprietary work for COVID. And I think when we had the chat initially, Councillor Durham, we were talking, weren't we, about the things that had happened, that it wasn't by chance any of our ability to be able to step up to respond to COVID, but we didn't know about COVID at this point, and these are all the things that we did. I mean, Chris, Ian, I don't know if there's anything on that slide that you want to pick up on around the authentication, multi-factor authentication, or kind of exchange online. Is there anything that you want to say about that?
The one thing was, it's the the authentication and secure authentication can't be overemphasized, really. It's certainly one of the bricks in the wall that's kept us safe from the attacks that Redcar and Cleveland Council have experienced, and Newcastle and Northumbria as well. It's these kind of underpinning things that enable the rapid COVID response.
Okay. Then we've got COVID. There's my nice COVID slide for you all. That then came along in 2020, and we realised then that there were a few things that we needed to do very, very quickly. So our immediate objectives were that we had to mobilise staff, get them out of the building where possible, but critically important to keep our key services going. And in order to do that, if you think about all of our line of business applications, so in social care, we do everything through a system called Liquid Logic. We needed to make sure that wherever our social workers were, they could access that system. Our education system, the same. Our housing systems, Rebs and Bens systems, all of the same. We needed to be able to put people out there at home or, wherever they needed to be safely and quickly, but keep them working. So we looked for gaps where they were kind of business critical users that might not have had the right kit. I worked with chief officers under Elizabeth's guidance to kind of get all of those people grouped up with us under their different assistant directors, get the kit to them and get them out. We looked at different desktop solutions because some of our users have not gone home with a laptop. They've actually gone home with their desktop machine, where we've been able to transport them very quickly, efficiently and easily with their kit using some of this kind of technology architecture that's been afforded to us through this solution to be able to get them out and get them working. So we were really, really clear that there needs to be a continuity of service. So we did that, and then of course we pushed out Teams really quickly to these people. We'd done some small pilots with Microsoft Teams in different areas of the authority, my teams included, to kind of get a good user base, feedback to Zentral about things that may or may not be working well for the organisation. But we got to this point back in March and we just pushed it out. I think that's safe to say, Scrutiny, and we just went with it, didn't we? Because we knew that people would need to use it, and that then quickly became our key channel of communication.
Absolutely. It was very well adopted, very, very quickly. The graphs exponential in people to take up to using Teams. It was really impressive.
So, Chris, if you want to just talk us through quickly about what that preparation work meant we could do.
Yeah, sure. We have a remote access solution, which some of you might know as VPN, and it was built into our core systems. Every desktop and every laptop had the ability to scale up and access the network from home. That's driving value of the 365 contract, and it's in tune with the ST strategy as well as the ICT vision, and that was absolutely key. We've been advising colleagues in other councils and the police and healthcare settings how to deploy that solution rapidly, because some of them were tied in some quite complex VPN scenarios where they couldn't scale quickly without massive cost. We certainly, the pilots that we had with some teams within Darlington, we had a nucleus of knowledge that we could use to get teams deployed quickly. And I think the value of Teams is kind of there for everybody to see. And obviously we've deployed a lot of extra kit rapidly under Pip and Elizabeth's guidance to get the right devices to the right people at the right time as well. But all of this is premised on our technology architecture and our program, the way that we work very collaboratively with Darlington means that we've survived COVID, which kind of the proof's in the pudding there around the flexibility and the scalability of our systems whilst controlling the costs at the same time. None of it happened by accident. Of course, we weren't planning for COVID. We were just operating under a few very key design principles that stood us in good stead. Thanks, Vic.
Okay. So I suppose what's key for us all now is what happens now. What do we do beyond COVID and going into next year? We've now got a clearly defined programme for Office 365, which is again approved by Systems and Information Governance Group and reportable to chief officers. We'll continue with the collaboration between ourselves and Central, because we must always look to deliver best value from this application. That's our key driver, is to make it as efficient as possible. There's lots of areas of thinking about how we can align those objectives with our line of business applications, some of them that I've already mentioned. And we're all now used to using Teams. It's now the communications tool of choice. And, I've done some work with other authorities to look at how they're using it, and some of their setup, they can't use it like we're using it in line with, emails and kind of other working applications. They've got to come right out of what they're doing to then set up a communication channel to go back in under another login to do their work. So this seamless work that we've got here is, if I may say, probably one of the best in the North East. We've now looking with Lee's team, my team and Lee's team are working together on the OneDrive rollout, and that'll be a whole different way about how we manage our files and our file structure. It's going to be culturally quite a big shift, but we've learned so much about how to do that to date that I'm very confident we can do that and really make this investment work for the authority. We're looking at things like email retention and management in line with retention schedules and all of those things. And we will continue to look at each one of these applications within the suite. So back to that slide number 1 with the periodic table that probably made you all feel like you were back in a chemistry lesson. We'll look at that, and we'll continue to work with services to make sure that each one of those applications is really analysed, and where it is going to add value and bring efficiency, we will work with it in that regard. Does anybody have any questions for us with that said?
Thank you, Philippa. Thank you, Chris. It's just amazing. As you know, we briefly before this meeting, where we didn't fully appreciate that there was a lot of work that had been going on for a long time. So if I just open it up to members of the committee for questions, and what I'd just like to do is that there's obviously a number of people who would like to ask questions, so I'd just like to limit it to 2 questions, and obviously if you've got more, then come back in after that. So I've got Councillor Renton.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question. I just wanted it to be noted that it's absolutely amazing that we've had the ability to do all this remotely during COVID because of the work you've done previously. And I'm sat here on my bed quite comfy in a scrutiny committee, and to be able to do that with the baby downstairs asleep, it's absolutely brilliant. It just shows the power of technology. So well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Harker.
Thank you. I wanted to make some comments, but I did have some questions at the end. Like Councillor Benson, I think I come from an IT background in terms of my outside work, so I sort of understand and appreciate some of the work that you've had to do. I think, from my perspective, I think you were right to take a measured approach. I think there's always a risk with shiny new toys to rush them out and give them to everybody without really having an understanding how they work, and you can quite quickly end up in a real mess. And I've seen that at work, and I've seen that with customers that I work with through my work thing. So I would absolutely commend that approach, to be measured and careful, and to progress when you fully understand what it is that you're rolling out. Equally, the cost of these things are eye-watering, and the fact that you managed to reduce that contract price by quite so much, whoever was involved in that deserves huge commendation. We're not an organisation that gives bonuses out, but I'm sure if it's the private sector, those individuals would have been richly rewarded for what they did, because that is, a huge reduction in cost to the organisation. The questions I had, and Pip has touched in it to a little extent, is around training. I know from my own work perspective and as an individual using Microsoft products that the fundamental principles of Microsoft has always been about intuitive packages, and that They're supposed to be easy for people to use. You don't need a lot of training to understand how they work. I think from my perspective, as those packages have become far more complex over time, they are still intuitive, but the difficulty I think has arisen is that users are often left not knowing what they can do, and what they need telling is actually, are you aware you can do X, Y, and Z? And once they're told about that, they can then explore it. And the difficulty really is these days, I think, people not having any clue about, you introduce a new package and what some of the complex things that they can do, and finding the things that will help them in their day-to-day job. So my first question is, what are we doing as an organisation to enable that training, to make sure, and it's very difficult because you've got specific groups of people that will have specific needs in particular packages, and another group will have a very different need for use of it. And it's what thoughts going into how we train different groups of staff to make sure the bits of technology that's there that they can use to enable them to do their job much better. And the second question I have is really probably more aimed at Elizabeth. But I was hugely impressed with the organisation. It's, again, lots of commendations to staff, the speed at which staff were able to go home and work from home. The hassle I had with my employer, and I work in an organisation that writes software, of me being able to work from home with my day job was much harder than it was in terms of being able to do my council stuff suddenly from home. So, again, congratulations to staff. There is a downside to that, though, however, which does need to be managed from an HR perspective. Give people lots of kit, they can work from home very easily, and you then risk wandering into an area of presenteeism that people don't stop working because they're able to work at any hours of the day. It's how we manage that. There is a positive aspect of it. Again, from a personal aspect, I've worked flexible hours for many years with my work, and it's to what extent we're able to facilitate staff who need to, for whatever reasons, have a much more flexible working pattern, and how we can facilitate that so that it, enriches those people, but also benefits the organisation. Thank you.
Should I take question one, Pip? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely.
We had a review of the ICT structure last year, and we created what we call the end user computing team, and within that team is a number of slightly less technical people, more. I'm not really calling it training. It's about deriving value, and as you said, the art of the possible isn't a phrase I particularly like, but it suits quite well. The approach to implementing the tools, particularly the more complex ones that perhaps offer the most value in the end, is that there's no real substitute for kind of boots on the ground and really working with the teams and services and seeing where their challenges are and how we can map the technology onto that. So to supplement an IT team, a very engaged rollout rather than just switching things on in an email, we're also looking for a series of kind of in-service champions across the organisation, across the council, to work with us. And the hope there is that they can identify, where some of the gaps are, where some of the challenges are, and things that we can really help with. In addition to that, we're currently going through lots and lots of online resources that the Microsoft provide, kind of bite-sized videos. Do you feel this is available, that's available, that sort of thing, and trying to kind of find a balance between intriguing people, inspiring people, hopefully, to go on a journey and learn how things work, but not overloading, accepting that everyone's got a day job to do and they're very busy. That program is kind of in development at the moment, but there'll be a layered approach. There'll be somebody talking to you directly when we roll out new tools, with the overarching champions within services, some kind of online collaboration groups to get the discussion going, and then backed up with some permanent online training resources if people want to know more. it'll be a bit of a moving feast. It might adapt as we see what works and what doesn't. It's back to history for me because I wrote my dissertation on time to value and technology projects. I'm really interested in how it works in the real world beyond the theory. But there's a lot of focus in that area. Absolutely, Councillor Harker, just to make sure we get that piece right. We desperately don't want it to be, people find how to kind of bold and underline in the new system, and that's where they stop. As you say, with the eye water investments in the technology for me and for Central, the key there is that we step up productivity to bridge that gap, or hopefully all of that gap or some of that gap to work towards the investment that Darlington's made in the software. Thank you.
Thank you. You're on mute, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very well aware of the potential for that. And I think in the early days, there was quite a lot of people doing that. However, since then, we've really emphasised the message down to staff and managers that you must take your breaks. You need to look after your well-being, and then we've had well-being briefings, and I know information's gone out on comms as well. We are also looking at our workforce strategy at the moment. It's sort of halted because of COVID, and there will be a stream, particularly on agile working. I know the HR team are looking at what's happening in other areas and trying to get learning from other organisations as well, to make sure that we actually get it right for our staff. Because as you say, there's pros and cons, whereby, as I suppose as Councillor Renton was saying before, it's great in one way because it can give you a little bit more freedom over your flexibility in your working day. But we are very acutely aware that people can just sit down at 7 o'clock in the morning and forget to get back up again. So it's constant messaging at the moment and learning from others. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Chris. Just a question that I've got is that we've mobilised Office 365. How have managers been able to feed into employees and ensure that obviously the employees their well-being is being met, but there's outcomes. And work is being carried out, tasks are being finished, so to speak.
I'll take that one, Councillor Durham.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yes, with regard to that, I mean, we've said it's business as usual. So still have your one-to-ones, you still have your PDRs, you still have your team meetings. So that's actually all been going on anyway. There's actually been no change apart from the fact that we're not walking from one office to the other. We were always an organisation that worked on outcomes anyway. So if I just take my finance team, for example, they work in a big, huge open plan office. I don't sit in that office, but I know they're doing the work because I know that things are happening anyway. So we always really worked on an outcome basis as opposed to actually just watching people on a day-to-day. It certainly needs to be an eye needs to be kept on it, of course. But yes, we've always worked on the outcome basis. Thank you.
It's probably worth, Councillor, if I may just add at that point from a technology point of view, what Elizabeth said to me pretty early on is tell me who has got what kit and who needs additional to be able to do that. So things like webcams, headsets, headphones. So yes, there's the kind of the policy side and the work that we all do, but just to make sure that all managers and all team players had the kit that they needed to be able to do that. So we did that piece of work very early on. Of course, there were always people who kind of went without stuff for maybe a few days longer than they should have done because there were supply chain issues. We couldn't get things in quickly enough, but when we got them in, we turned them around, we got them out, so people weren't without the tools that they needed to be able to keep in touch, to be able to see their team, to be able to talk to their team and kind of use the applications and the relevant hardware to be able to do that, which is really important. Because sometimes you can go a day without seeing anybody unless you've got your camera on, and that's really a big part of the wellbeing offer. So we needed to align that with actually getting the kit out to people.
Thank you. Chris, you want to come in on that?
Yes, just to put forward a kind of an ethos that is working on our IoT around working in the open. Microsoft 365 has huge collaborative capabilities whereby, as a manager, you actually be able to see what your team are working on in the last time you updated documents and systems and things. So that'll be information about that. I'll be coming on stream kind of very, very shortly. But it will absolutely help this kind of remote working, team collaboration, and knowing where everyone's at. Idea. Thank you.
So that then, if you just let me, that then moves on to the second question, which was within the slide. There was also obviously talking about multi-device users. Have we got, you know, people who are in the field and who aren't maybe desk-based? Have they got the correct IT at this moment, the correct tech, or is that something that's under review?
So there's the couple of things there. We've supported mobile phones, tablets, and PCs and standard desktops for some time, and always try to work with people to match the kit. But of course, in an increasingly mobile world, Elizabeth's asked me to work on a paper to look at that. It's almost finalised, just around options for increased mobility and the right sort of kit. That's in development at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So anybody else got any questions? Any comments? No. Well, thank you very much, Pip. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Ian. I think it was in the background.
Sorry, Chair. I think you've got Councillor Body who might want to say something.
Sorry, I must have. Councillor Body, I did miss that. Oh, your hand's gone down. Councillor Body.
Yes, I just wanted to ask really about the history of the system and you adopting Microsoft 365. Did you look at, just as a matter of interest really, did you look at comparative systems? And,
yes.
And are you keeping under review, you know, technological changes? Because things have happened so rapidly, you know, over the last 30, 40 years. Things change so, you know, in the blink of an eye. What do you explore? What other alternatives there might be out there in the marketplace?
Absolutely, yeah. Chris, do you want to pick that up from your point of view and
yes, we
pick
did
up the work we did with Google Docs?
Yeah, in 2017 we had a very deep, very good look at Google Docs and Google G Suite. The technology was fabulous. It was a real contender from a pure tech point of view. Unfortunately, it kind of fell down around compatibility with our corporate business systems. Some of the large vendors, Kappa Pacifica, actually came on and said, we have no plans to integrate with the Google Suite, which caused some problems. Equally, our peers and the rest of the sector and the private sector were using Microsoft Office. And yeah, the technology for a greenfield site would be absolutely fantastic, but in our world, we just couldn't get there from a cost or compatibility perspective. Unfortunately, we had a little look at open source. There were lots of security questions that we couldn't answer, unfortunately, at the time.
I think, Councillor Body, if I just might add at that point, that we did look at other authorities that were kind of entertaining the Google way, and anybody that was entertaining that has now kind of gone back to Microsoft. So we'll always keep our eye on it, because it's key that we look at how our strategy delivers and the efficiency that we're getting. But when I speak to suppliers, so I work with Capita, with Civica, with Liquid Logic, everybody that provides our line of business applications, they're not on that page. So it would cause us quite a disparity between what we need to offer to keep the organisation going, which is the line of business stuff, and then this stuff. So it's really key to get that efficiency that we work with, and it's Microsoft are big players out there to kind of drive that. But absolutely right, we must never just assume that it's only them. So our strategy makes sure that we keep our eyes on that.
Thank you, Councillor Body. As I said before, thank you, Pippa. Thank you, Chris, for presenting this morning. You know, as we had a briefing, it was an eye opener to the amount of work that's gone on, and I'd just like to thank you very much. You said that, Chris, in terms of you're just about finalising that work on the mobile platforms, etc. Elizabeth, is that something that we could bring to a meeting as and when it's finished? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Appreciate that. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, if we move on to agenda item number 5, which is the annual report 2019-20 for complaints, compliments and comments. And if I'd just like to hand over to Lee Downey.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
When I'm not busy working with Pip and Chris on all that exciting stuff, but one of my other roles is to manage the council's complaints. So the report really is to consider the 2019-20 annual complaints report for adult social care, children's social care, corporate complaints, housing complaints and public health complaints. And there's a lot of procedures there, and ideally we would like to have one standard approach, but there's different bits of legislation that set out how we have to deal with particular complaints, hence the variety of procedures. So attached to Annex 1 is the annual report, which is due to be considered by the Cabinet on the 15th of September. And I suppose one of the key things that to emphasise really is that, you know, receiving complaints is not a bad thing, that we continually strive to ensure we have an organisational culture in which complaints are accepted, that they're owned and they're resolved as close to that point as they're made as possible, and that we actually use the information we gather from complaints as a way of learning as an organisation, and, you know, kind of essentially implement that learning to reduce similar complaints coming through and improve people's experience of using council services. So if we move down to page 15, which is page 9 in your pack, which is the Cabinet report. So what this report really does is it pulls together all of those complaints procedures and gives us an overarching picture of the complaints the council have received. So in total, in 2019-20, we received 838 complaints, and it was a slight increase from 825 in the previous year. Similarly, we look at the compliments we received because we want to get this overall picture of feedback. We received 292 compliments, which again was a slight increase from 280. And we also look at the comments. So people aren't complaining, but they're talking to us, they're suggesting new ways of doing things, maybe they're passing comment on policies we've implemented. And we actually saw a reduction in them from 240 in the previous year down to 168. So there's a summary table in Appendix 1 of the Cabinet report, which is on page 15 in your pack, I think. It's page 16 in your pack. And that really shows the overall volume of complaints received under each of the procedures, and it shows the trend data going back over the last 5 years. So it helps us kind of look at, you know, other particular service areas. So you'll see in corporate there was a slight increase, well, a fairly significant increase in 17-18, 18-19. In adults we saw an increase in 17-18, and that's come back down. In housing, steady decrease in complaints, and that's been underpinned by some really good work in terms of learning from, you know, what the themes were coming from complaints. So if we just go back up to page 12 in your pack, which is the main report to Cabinet, and again it really emphasises our organisational approach, the culture we want in terms of, you know, making the complaints procedures accessible and appreciating that, you know, if people do have a genuine complaint, we understand it is sometimes difficult to complain, and we're there to listen and to support them and to make sure that their issues are properly addressed. And this bit of the report, it really gives you a little summary of each area. So in adult social care, we saw a small increase in the number of complaints, a significant increase in the number of compliments, which was great, and a small decrease in the number of comments. In children's social care, we saw a decrease in complaints at all stages of a procedure. So that's got a 3-stage procedure, which was really good. There was also a decrease in the number of compliments received, and the number of comments remained the same. So in corporate, there was an increase in the number of complaints received at stage 1, but there was a decrease in the number of those that went on to stage 2. So that's demonstrating we've resolved more, at that earlier stage. There was a decrease in the number of compliments and a significant decrease in the number of comments. Like I mentioned, in housing, those complaints have gone down. We saw a decrease again, and we saw a significant increase in the number of compliments alongside that, which was good. Public health, we have very low numbers of complaints. There was an increase, but we're talking a couple of complaints there. And then the report really goes on to pick out some of the learning, and it sets out some examples of what we've learned from complaints. So this is on page 13 in your pack, so paragraph 20. So it sets out some of the learning from adult social care, moves on to children's social care, corporate complaints, and there's more learning that's actually in the reports themselves, which carry on at appendix 2 to the cabinet report on page 17 in your pack. But it's just pulling out some of those really good examples where we've improved practice and improved services as a result of complaints, and highlighting those. So, and that's it really. So the recommendation, I suppose, on the report is essentially that members consider the annual reports and forward any views to Cabinet for consideration on the 15th. So, are there any questions people would like to ask around that?
Okay, I'd just like to open up the floor. Has anybody got any questions? I've got Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. My question is just in regards to where we sit in regards to like a national picture and regional. What's our complaints level like if we were to pitch ourselves against other authorities?
We don't. There's not a lot of benchmarking. We had previously done benchmarking across the Tees Valley, and so in the Ombudsman annual report they set out some benchmarking information. So they look at us against other unitaries and then other, kind of similar sized authorities. I don't know the specific answer to the question, but I could certainly get some information and send that to you in terms of the annual report of the Ombudsman. We have looked, like I said previously, to do benchmarking with neighbouring authorities, but it might be that there's a particular issue affecting Darlington, or particular policy we're implementing, or practice that sees a spike in complaints at a particular time. Other authorities will have similar things going on, and then we'll see a reduction. So we've not found it hugely useful, because when we've drilled down as to why there was more in Darlington this year than in Stockton, we could identify what was around this particular issue. But like I said, I could get some information pulled together, certainly at an Ombudsman complaint level, and send that to you if that'd help.
Yeah, probably would. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Tate. I've got Councillor Renton.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if you could shed a bit more light on the significant increases in compliments in service area and team. So, basically, you seem to have had a huge increase in the compliments. So, if you could just let me try and. So it's a variety really. There's no kind of one specific thing you could hang your hat on. We saw increases in compliments in lots of service areas. So I think particularly in the corporate complaints procedure, which is the overwhelming majority of complaints are received under that procedure. So I think it was split across a lot of
community services, so like street cleaning, and I just try and grab the information while you're there.
It's all right.
So essentially, off the top of my head, I can't pin it on one particular service area. There was lots of areas that saw increases. So economic growth and neighbourhood services, quite a few of their services saw increases. And again, I would have to drill down really into that larger report and pull those out. I'd certainly be happy to do that for you. But like I say, it was a spread across a variety of services, really. And I think part of it might have been better reporting, because we're sometimes not as quick to recognise, oh, that's a compliment, someone sent me a nice card, someone sent a thank you letter, and we've really worked with teams to say, look, it is important to recognise that and to make sure it's recorded and give that fuller picture of the feedback that we receive. So, is that all right?
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was a change in whether you encourage the compliments more, or if it is just a change in the reporting then.
Yeah, not encourage them necessarily more, just encourages officers to make sure they recognise them and forward them on to be recorded. Because sometimes we'll show them to the manager and say that's a nice kind of pat on the back, but not necessarily forward them to be recorded centrally. So.
That's very positive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got Councillor Body.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, the housing complaints, presumably this is housing that the authority manages. Has there been any reduction in the housing estate, in the number of properties being managed?
There hasn't, no, not that I'm aware of. If anything, I think there's been an increase. If someone could confirm that, who's in the meeting, we've been building more social housing. So actually we've seen more housing and, like I said, less complaints, and it was really underpinned by some great work by the team in looking at the trends and saying, what are the issues that people are raising, and can we kind of get in and nip those in the bud and kind of, implement things to prevent those escalating to the point where they become a complaint. So.
Thank you. Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to come back in. It's just a question in regards to the total number of complaints we received, 838. How many of them went on to be referred to the Ombudsman?
So the next report is the Ombudsman report. So I'd have to, again, in the annual letter of the Ombudsman, which I can send you, it'll have our total figure. So the next report we're going to come on to is the 6-monthly Ombudsman report. And that looks at how many decisions have been made by the Ombudsman in the last 6 months. We do receive an annual letter from the Ombudsman that says this is how many have gone to the Ombudsman. I think it's in the 20s possibly, but unfortunately my computer won't connect to the network, so I can't grab that figure straight away. But I could certainly, like I say, send that annual letter to you, which also includes that. So it includes, the total numbers, what the outcomes were, what services are related to. Approximately 20 to 30, I would say.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow on from that, because you've mentioned it already, obviously we do review complaints and we do take learnings from them. I work in an industry where we are, but it's took a long time to be number one for customer service, and that's in like the mobile world for BT and EE. Yeah. Do we have a culture and a sort of attitude as a council that we actually want to reduce the amount of complaints that come in? So at the moment it's sitting at 838. Obviously, from a background of being, we want to reduce the complaints. Is that what we would strive to do for next year? We would like to see that at a lower number.
In some senses, yes. So if you had a high volume of complaints in a particular area about a particular issue, you would want to look at what the themes were and drive those complaints down. But obviously, we work in a very dynamic area. And for example, we'll bring online new services. So last year we saw the green waste collection come online. So it's inevitable the volumes will vary depending on what service changes are implemented. So historically, I think about 2 years ago, we implemented the transformation agenda in adults. Obviously, it was a significant change in the way we delivered adult social care services. So you'll always see kind of peaks and troughs, but in terms of overall, we would expect to see a roughly static number, I suppose, because of the size of the organisation. But we would want to kind of pick up on particular themes and try and address those. I don't think we would ever. It's a balance, I suppose. We don't ever want to have no complaints, because really, if you're not getting any, something's wrong with your accessibility of your procedure, I would say, rather than actually everyone's entirely happy with the service they're receiving. So we want people to be able to access the procedure. We want to learn from it. And yes, like I say, in certain areas we would want to drive that number down if there's a theme identified. But I don't think we'll ever see a time where we get to really low numbers unless there's issues with the accessibility.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Harker.
Thank you. What I was going to say sort of picks up a little bit on Lee's response to Councillor Tate. I think we should never forget that a local authority is a huge, complex organisation. We have staff that work in many different disciplines, and like many private sector organisations that tend to focus on one particular areas, we deploy staff in a huge range of different disciplines, many of them dealing with extremely difficult circumstances, adult social care, children's social care, often dealing with families who are going through difficult times. I don't think we will ever get to a situation where there are no complaints. And I think, as Lee touched upon it, if we did, I'd be very suspicious that things were being brushed under the carpet. We are all human. We do all sadly make mistakes from time to time. And I think what's probably more important is the analysis that's in the report about when mistakes are made, how they are addressed. I think one of the things I've observed over many years being on the local authority is that, generally speaking, there aren't that many trends in those complaints that come in. Occasionally there are, but by and large, it's pretty random if you're looking for trends. And I think it just comes down to, sadly, occasionally people make mistakes. And I think the other thing that we need to be reflective of the facts and compliment the staff is that, unlike a private sector organisation, we do have to wash our dirty washing in public. We publish this report. We have to tell the world all the mistakes that we made. And I think we need to acknowledge that's very difficult for staff. In my private sector work, if I make a mistake, customers know about it. But apart from that, very few people find out about it. Here, people are working in circumstances where if they make a mistake, potentially that does become very public. And for staff to deal with that, I think we do need to acknowledge at times they are working in a very public setup. And the fact that we see reports like this, I think does, to me, by and large, indicate that on the vast majority of occasions, all our staff do the best that they can and probably rarely do make mistakes. And we shouldn't forget that there are hundreds of people working with the organisation. And in terms of transactions, I don't know how many there are in a year, but there will be countless transactions between our staff and members of the public. And probably, if we're honest about it, the number of complaints that come in are relatively small. And I just think we should acknowledge that in terms of the work that the staff do.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. Have we got anybody else who's got any questions? Okay. So I think I would just carry on from what Councillor Harker was saying. Just some observations and comments, and it's whether or not, as a committee, we decide to recommend these to Cabinet. In that the report doesn't provide that context in terms of the volume of complaints, insofar as the volume of tasks or transactions which may be going through that service. I think the report itself as well, it's obviously a report which is prepared in isolation and refers back to previous years, but within the graphical elements, it doesn't actually provide that that reference. So I think that would be an opportunity. Just as a point, Lee, and I'll send an email. There's a number of questions, etc., and it may be the fact that it may be appropriate to refer it back to the relevant scrutiny committees. But there's some formatting issues within the report. It's also one of the questions in that at the end of every report, it says that there will be further recommendations. So, for example, if I go to page 48, the Council should continue to work to improve performance against the Stage 2 timescale for children's social care complaints. Well, you know, it doesn't further elaborate on how that will be met. What is the process? Going back to the Hippodrome, which is on. Apologies, I said a number of notes. I think it might actually be in the next one. Page 67, 69, 72. Right. If I move on to page 72, it's not actually referenced. I think it's page 25 in the report.
Yeah.
Yeah. It mentions there that there were 10 upheld complaints. Now, the report actually says at the top that it's during 2018-19. I think that must be 2019-20.
Right. Sorry, what page is that, Councillor?
It doesn't have a page number at the bottom, but it's page 20. It follows on from page 72, which was page 24 of the report, page 25. I do appreciate all the work that's gone into this. It is a meaty report.
Yes, yeah, that would appear to be an error. It should say the table below shows decisions reached during 1920. Yes.
Okay, so going on to page 77, there's one question I would like to ask. It obviously says about the complaints of the Hippodrome, which resulted in a review of the processes. Is the same security company in place?
I don't know the answer to that, Councillor Durham. I would have to find out and come back to you.
Okay. As I said, I've got a number of questions. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll formulate those and I'll send them on and obviously share those with the group.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Have we got any more questions? Okay. As I said, I would like to make a recommendation, and it's obviously if the committee is happy, in that there is some context included in the report. As Councillor Harker quite said, we would be very, very surprised if there weren't any complaints, and also that there is contained within the report in future an easy comparison in the previous year, so that members can understand the trend. Is the committee happy with that? Okay, just like a quick show of hands if you're happy with that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee. So obviously moving on to the next item of the agenda, which is the review of the complaints made to the local government ombudsman. And I believe that's, as I said, it's you again, Lee. Yes,
yeah. So this kind of answers partly your question, Councillor Tay, because it looks at the last 6 months. So previously, Cabinet had decided they would like to look at the decisions made by the Ombudsman on a 6-monthly basis, and also now that the Housing Ombudsman, so the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, cover the majority of our services. For the last couple of years, the Housing Ombudsman, with a single Ombudsman for housing sector and unitary authorities, were an outlier in that we reported to the Local Government Ombudsman and we've moved over to the Housing Ombudsman now. So the report sets out the decisions reached by the Ombudsman since the last report to Cabinet, and essentially if we move down to page 111 in the pack, it says the opportunity is normally taken to analyse the areas of the council function where complaints have arisen, and essentially again try to establish if there's any topics or trends that have arisen where further action might need to be taken. So between the 1st of October 19 and the 31st of March 20, 7 cases were subject to decision by the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman and 1 by the Housing Ombudsman. They're summarised in the table. So you can see for the Local Government Ombudsman, the first 3 were closed after initial inquiries and no further action was taken. And that's one of the decisions the Ombudsman can make under the Local Government Act. The second 2 were closed after initial inquiries on the basis they were outside of jurisdiction. And the last 2 were obviously upheld, and there was some maladministration identified and some injustice to the complainant, which we'd then seek to remedy. So the Ombudsman would make some recommendations and we would implement those. The Housing Ombudsman finding was no maladministration. So I suppose the ones that are really of interest are the upheld maladministration decisions. So if you just go down to page 112, so we can see there's a little synopsis of what those are in paragraph 16 and 17. And they're really related to our kind of assessment of people's financial contribution towards their adult social care services. So in both cases, the Ombudsman made some recommendations which we've implemented. So the report really, kind of doesn't identify that there's a need for any further action to be taken other than that which has already been done as a result of the complaints. And again, the recommendation is that the report is considered by members and, then for any comments forwarded to Cabinet for consideration. So again, I'm quite happy to take questions and hopefully answer them. If not, certainly come back to you.
Thank you, Lee. I'll just open up the floor again. Has anybody got any questions? I've got Councillor Tate and then Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. Just in regards to the Ombudsman's piece, obviously we were parting on that for the 6 months. Do you know what the figure was for the previous 6 months of that year?
Not off the top of my head, but if my computer connects to the network now, which it looks like it does, I should be able to grab that for you pretty quickly.
Okay. I don't know if it's something to be considered, but because the complaints report covers the whole year, and we report on the Ombudsman on the 6 month, would it be possible to include it moving forward, just as an add on the end to say, like in the first half of the year, we received so many, just so when I get this report, obviously I'm new to this committee, I don't know what the previous report was.
Yes, certainly. I mean, Cabinet had decided they wanted it reporting, biannually. It was monthly, I think, then it went to quarterly, then biannually. Certainly we could do it as a 6 monthly and then an annual if that's what members wanted. So it had the whole year's figures in there.
I think for the second half of the year report, just to include it on the end would be useful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In answer to your question, there was 11 cases determined by the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman between the 1st of April and the 30th of September, and there were 0 cases determined by the Housing Ombudsman.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Apologies, my mic was off. Councillor Harker.
Thank you. It's a question in relation to the case that was determined as being maladministration in paragraphs 16 and 17. I'm not clear from what's written in the paragraph in 17 whether it talks about there's a couple of sentences to resolve the complaint. The council agreed that within 4 weeks of the decision it would reconsider whether, etc., etc. Question was, I wasn't sure whether what we'd been asked to do was something specific to that individual or whether we changed our processes as a whole? I.e., did we get something wrong with that individual, or was the Ombudsman saying we need to amend the processes in that area?
In 17, yeah, so they kind of asked us, to properly. So I think the disability-related expenditure issue, we did actually look at it, and they give us quite a clear steer in that case, as I remember, and we did amend our processes to ask 3 very specific questions around disability-related expenditure, and ensure those questions are built into all financial assessments, and I believe that has now been implemented within the service. And it's had quite positive response from the finance manager. She said it was particularly helpful, actually. So, we learned from that particular case, and hopefully we'll see less complaints of that nature, or none, hopefully, as we move forward.
And was that the case also in paragraph 16? Because I think they're 2 different.
Yeah. So intentionally. Yeah, so there was some individual resolution actions again, but there was also some organisational learning. Nice. So around record keeping, kind of explaining decisions properly and clearly to people, and referring back to the guidance. So that there was some, not necessarily process change, but more practice change, I suppose, in that particular case.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any questions?
Chair, can I just ask?
Please. Just
to be clear on the process in terms of amending this report from a 6-monthly, like a biannual, to a cumulative report, is that just for the scrutiny committee, or is it also in terms of a cabinet report, and does that need to go to cabinet, or do we just proceed in that manner as requested?
Well, I think one will feed into the other, won't it?
So that's
what. Sorry, well, we're talking about this item on the agenda. Are you going back to the previous recommendation?
Yeah, Councillor Tate's request. Oh, sorry. The report became a cumulative report at the end of the year. So the decision that it was kind of presented in this way was previously made by Cabinet. So I just wanted to clarify, is the expectation it changes now, or do I need?
No, I think moving forward, I think we can be referred back to the last report. That would be fine.
All right, great. Thank you.
We got any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Lee.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Appreciate your time.
No problem.
Okay. If we move on to agenda item number 7, which is economic indicators, the impact of COVID-19, and that is a presentation. And I believe this is where Ian Williams is going to come in.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, apologies from Mark Ladyman. He would have been here today, but he's had the audacity to take 5 days off in Scotland, enjoying bonny Scotland. So good luck to Mark, well deserved. We've had a presentation today from IT on the benefits, so I just hope that I can share this presentation, because otherwise it'll undo all the good work of our colleagues. So just bear with me 1 second.
Pressure's on, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you all see that? Yeah, good.
Yep.
So what I intend to do today is run through a few slides, just giving some headlines, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail about some of the work the Combined Authority have done, some of the key stats and figures that have emerged, and some thoughts for the future as we move forward, and obviously highlighting some of the risk areas for our economy. Generally, Darlington has continued to perform well on most measures and has done for a while. But as you know, across the borough, there are always a number of challenges you have to face. Some clearly economic, some health and well-being, and certainly the disparity between the haves and the have-nots in Darlington is quite stark. What I want to do is highlight some headlines so we understand the context of our economy and what's emerged in this COVID world in particular. Unemployment is certainly growing, and I'll give you the statistics showing the growth at unemployment later, and in particular in certain groups. Some concerns over the young accessing employment opportunities in Darlington, and the type of employment opportunities that are going to be created. I'm not going to go through all of those, but that just gives a flavour that across the piece we are looking as a council at all of the indicators, not just the economic, but clearly today I'll give you the headlines on the economy. Darlington's economy is pretty well balanced in terms of we don't expect to have any major structural change or economic shock. So we haven't, for example, got a major steelworks or a major automotive plant. We are a fairly mixed economy, pretty well spread, but we've got a lot of micro businesses in Darlington. There's, as the stat says there, 3,500. Many of those are micro businesses. A significant number of our small businesses are also in retail, and clearly with what's happening in COVID is a particular risk. Unemployment did in fact start increasing last year, but as of March when it was measured, it was 6.2. It's higher than that now. Darlington residents are more likely to be economically active than many other parts of the North East. So we've got what I will say is most of Darlington's population generally is seeking and looking for work, which can't be said for all parts of the North East of England. Productivity in Darlington remains above the North East average. So again, that's a positive indicator. Our largest sectors, as the slide would say, are business admin and support, professional scientific, significant in care and education, but importantly for COVID, retail amounts to 11.2% of our workforce. I'll come on to the claimant count and needs a little later in the presentation. There are some concerning statistics regarding NEETs with a 50% rise in the latest period. Again, as we move forward into the October roll, we'll have a better handle on what our NEETs figure is. We had a figure for the last few years of around 600 NEETs. Does change, but generally around that level. But we are now bumping up at around the 900 level. I'll explain some of the measures that we are taking as a combined authority and a council to try to address that, especially with packages like the YEI and our own training schemes. Moving through. Skills. The Strategic Economic Plan from the Combined Authority had an ambition to create 7,000 full-time jobs by 2036. That still remains the ambition. It's important to note the skills requirements moving forward here, and something where we've got to pay particular attention to in working with the university and our colleges and our schools, in that Darlington residents are less likely than the national average to have no qualification, which is a good thing. However, we don't have enough people achieving higher level qualifications, and that's something that we have to be particularly acutely aware of. Skill shortages in Darlington generally were for professional occupations, and this has been recently more informed by a further survey work the Combined Authority has done. Skill shortages are present in the caring sector. We've known that for a while, and certainly in leisure and other services in Darlington. 89% of vacancies reported as being hard to fill in Darlington are allegedly due to skill shortages that are present. Sometimes that can be a bit misleading because companies are sometimes not very good expressing what requirements they have for their people, and sometimes have an unrealistic expectation that the individual is shovel ready on day one, and that the companies themselves have to actually invest in training and upskilling the people as well. I'll close at that, and then I'll take you through some narrative, if I can, Chair. So COVID and the research work, that what we're finding on the ground and what the research work the Combined Authority are pointing to. Clearly in June, the Organisation for Economic Development stated that the economic impact for the country would be, quote, dire everywhere. Recovery would be slow, would certainly go well into 2021 before we saw a normal economic cycle return. But the biggest threat, and that was confirmed by the Prime Minister just last night, the biggest threat would be if COVID returns and we had significant spikes in COVID. That would be the biggest impact or threat to our economy moving forward. COVID has hit young people hard. When I give an indication of the unemployment levels we have, as I said, in NEETs alone, our figure has risen in Darlington from 600 to 900. Our unemployment for younger people has risen from a figure of just over 600 in the young sector, the 18 to 24, to 1,000. So you're seeing across the board that the COVID epidemic has impacted very significantly. You would expect, but the age range 25 to 49 has seen claimant count rise from around 1,600 to over 2,500 in Darlington in the corresponding period. So you're seeing that the claimant count has increased, in particular the age grouping 25 to 49. Moving on to footfall. Major cities across the country, and particularly in the north, are significantly affected through COVID. Estimates in the north and the UK would indicate that major centres have suffered throughout COVID something like a 40% drop in footfall in city centres. Darlington's estimate year-to-date to 2020 is around 18%. So we appear to be faring slightly better than some of the major cities and towns, and that figure tends to correlate to other towns of similar size. Number of visitors counted per month in July was around 600,000. Our by far busiest day so far in the COVID world has been Saturday, the 1st of August, with nearly 41,000 visitors being recorded. Assumptions we have on flow of people, and again we'll use car parking as a particular measure, and it can be quite challenging given what we've done on car parking recently, but across the north, people are assuming that car parking will return slowly as a measure of people coming to towns and cities, and our working assumption is around 60 to 70% of our car parking usage, and that is comparable with what other towns and cities are forecasting moving forward. So what you're going to see is not a significant return to the old days of car parking usage and footfall, but a slow, gradual return to normal life in town centres. The Combined Authority has done a survey of business, and I'd just like to share some of the findings with you because I think it sets the context and the flavour as to how COVID has impacted on business and shaped some of their findings moving forward. 46% of those surveyed by the Combined Authority have indicated a significant reduction in demand for their products and services, to be expected. Over a third of businesses have taken to much smarter working practices. So like you heard from our colleagues, agile working and new ways of working, most businesses where they can have been able to adapt to that. 83% of businesses remain concerned about reduced business volume or revenue over the next 3 to 6 months. So businesses are viewing this very much as a longer term or a medium term recovery. Importantly, half of the businesses surveyed, 52%, actually said they had no plans to make redundancies or terminate subcontractors, which was quite a positive. 73% of businesses do not anticipate requiring additional staff to meet demand. So clearly, I think you can assume from that we're not going to see a significant increase in recruitment from those companies, whilst there is volatility, uncertainty in the economic conditions out there. Across the Tees Valley, so I've talked about Darlington's claimant count rising. Across the Tees Valley, there have been nearly 10,000 new unemployment-related claims. That was a figure in April. That has now gone up. 32% of the region's workforce in the height of COVID were furloughed. and 16% of that time were made redundant. I think at the height there were something in the order of 13,000 Darlington residents that were furloughed. That is now reduced fairly significantly. I don't have the accurate figure. I can get it if committee members would like it, but I understand it's around 6,000 or 7,000 now of those furloughed. And of course, it's a different type of furloughing, with people being furloughed for part-time activity. 60% of the employment impacts of COVID have occurred in 6 key sectors across the Tees Valley, and that's retail, as you would anticipate, manufacturing, where markets have fallen dramatically, health, hospitality in particular, education, and of course construction, although construction is now starting to return to something like its normal levels. Furloughs in the Tees Valley are disproportionately men, and that's primarily driven by the manufacturing slowdown and the construction slowdown. Those under 25 are primarily in the retail and the leisure sectors. So in terms of local actions, it's important to acknowledge that what Darlington Council can do to stimulate an economy is somewhat limited, but of course, strategically across the Tees Valley, we work with our partner, the Combined Authority, and we'll introduce initiatives as we see fit, and certainly help influence the direction of travel with government. And I know the Combined Authority is feeding lots of information into government, and hopefully that will shape some of the interventions that will still emerge as recovery accelerates. As you would anticipate, since lockdown was introduced and after lockdown, there has been a rapid number of businesses seeking emergency advice, both from the council and from the Combined Authority. A lot of that at the time was seeking emergency financial assistance. Moving on to that, just to remind councillors that we administered particularly effectively and efficiently something like £24 million of the first phase of business support grant to business. That saw nearly 2,100 businesses in our borough receive grants respectively of 10,000 and 25,000. And I think at the time we were ranked the 7th quickest local authority to distribute that money fully. Moving on from that, of course, members will be aware that business rate discounts of 16.6 million have also been awarded to nearly 700 retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, providing full exemption for business rates 2020 to 2021. Further, 2 months ago, we were asked by government to introduce and deliver a discretionary grant scheme, a further incentive to support those businesses most adversely affected. And we administered a further 1.2 million of government support through that discretionary grant scheme to an additional 105 businesses. And again, that was administered in full in pretty sharp order. Members will be aware that government are introducing a number of support to business initiatives at the moment, and will continue to do so. And the Combined Authority and the Council will clearly try to maximise take-up of those for our companies. In particular, waiting details on the Kickstart programme that may be of particular value to our younger people to get them work experience and support and entry into the workplace. Throughout the crisis, the Council has continually tried to support businesses with advice, administering the government financial support schemes, to align and refer them to national schemes, national initiatives where we can. We've supported regularly our web pages on information and guidance. We've been promoting significantly the Tees Valley Combined Authority grant schemes. In particular, we will on Kickstarting Leisure and the Hospitality Restart programmes. We've done our bit on town centre promotion, and you'll be aware that we have tried to move fairly quickly in introducing appropriate social distancing measures in the town to enable our nighttime economy to operate effectively, and to people hopefully to have the confidence to resume and use the facilities in the town centre. Not an easy thing. You can't keep everyone happy when you do such measures, but I think the attempts and the work we did, for example, around the Coniscliffe area to introduce a Thursday to Sunday has been pretty well received by residents and businesses alike. As members will know, we've tried where we can to introduce the markets again to Darlington, with the Peace Pudding Market starting again on Thursdays. The macro level, we've continued to push government with our High Street bid, slightly more longer term in terms of recovery, but also our town bid. And I'm pleased to say that we have already been indicated that we've got £1 million of the 25 million of the town's bid, and we're currently working up how that money will be spent on the town centre. In terms of further programmes and support, I've referenced a few times young people here, and those who are sadly out of work. We are looking and are talking to government through Combined Authority to extend the YEI scheme, which was due to end next year. I can report that it is looking increasingly likely that we will be given flexibility with government support to extend that YEI scheme. So that we'll be able to provide mentoring and advice and support to get those people furthest away from the jobs market ending cycle. We're also having similar discussions with DWP about extending the programme again for those who are furthest away from the jobs market, because it's clear that those who are more disproportionately affected are those who either have got low skills or have been away from the jobs market for a considerable while. So the focus of those two programmes in particular is on that catchment group. In terms of recovery planning, I indicated in my narrative that no one's viewing this as a sharp, quick return. We're indicating that it's looking... Councillor Boddy? You're on mute.
I beg your pardon. I just wanted to ask you a question at the end. I didn't want...
Oh, sorry, Councillor Boddy. I thought you wanted to interrupt me mid-flow. Sorry.
No.
OK, I'm nearly there. So in terms of recovery planning, the Combined Authority are very much leading the strategic work and is looking at a number of themes. There are 5 or 6 themes that I'll sort of refer committee to here. One is around confidence, confident people, confident businesses, because clearly we've all had a shock and a jolt with COVID, and encouraging people, whatever the new norm is going to be a key part of work moving forward. Education, skills and jobs. I've talked a number of times about education. I've talked about the skill levels and the unemployed. That will be a significant part of the immediate short-term recovery plan from Combined Authority, and again, asks of government in particular are going into that area. I've alluded to agile companies and productivity. 36% of our companies in the Tees Valley have adopted agile working and are adapting their workplace to work in a different way, a different environment. That's going to continue, and part of the Combined Authority's work moving forward will be to accelerate and encourage that, to introduce more resilience into our companies. The building blocks for growth. I've referred to the Towns Fund, the Flexible High Street. Members will be aware that the council, of course, have got plans to stimulate the Heritage Quarter. We've also got the bank top regeneration. These big schemes are what we can do, supported by government, to accelerate growth and to accelerate that regeneration of our area, and that will continue. Final theme, Tees Valley being fit for health and social care. And again, we don't know where government are at with regard to their thoughts on what they might want to do with adult and social care in the NHS. But certainly we are keen to ensure that the Tees Valley will be at the front of how we deliver those new services moving forward. So that's part of the work the Combined Authority are doing on our behalf. The final area, and I'm sure you'll have heard Ben Houchin talk extensively about this, is encouraging home shoring, encouraging more people to come to work back to the UK, not just manufacturing but also service technologies, but in particular how we drive green technologies forward in the Tees Valley area, how we can lead and promote low carbon sectors in the Tees Valley and drive and accelerate that green jobs agenda. Councillors, I'm conscious I've crammed a lot in there in a short space of time. I'm very happy to take questions, and I will scribble questions down. If I don't have the answer today, I will endeavour to get back to you. Hopefully that's made some sense.
Thank you, Ian. Right, let's open up the floor then. So I've got Councillor Boddy.
I just wondered, are we keeping any statistics on incomes? My friends who work in regional organisations who have an overview of the whole region say that we have all of the building blocks here for prosperity, but the thing that seems to be missing is money in the economy. And if we could increase that, I think there's a possibility that we could see a very bright future, really. But the thing that concerns me is some big local employers who do provide entry-level jobs into the jobs market for young people are paying significantly below the market rate, sometimes of people they work alongside. And it's very concerning that the local economy might actually be being depressed by the fact that we have big local employers who are paying perhaps something in the region of $4,000 a year less than might be considered to be the market rate. Are we keeping any statistics on this, and are we feeding that information as a result of that into the short-term recovery plan for government to make them aware of the problem? Yes,
absolutely correct, Councillor Buddy. Your analysis of the wage economy in Darlington isn't wrong. Yes, we do keep statistics, and we are feeding it in. Some of the challenges we have in our economy, on one of the first slides I put up, was whilst we have a significant and healthy percentage of people in employment, we are not a particularly high wage economy. So as part of our longer term strategy for a good number of years now is to try to grow and encourage inward investment and also indigenous companies who employ people, local people as well, but who pay and attract higher wages. And that would drive up the prosperity agenda in Darlington. So yes, it's positive that we've got a good mix of employment across Darlington with no one sector overly dominating. It's pretty low value, some of it. A significant amount, of about 11% in retail, and we know retail generally is not a particularly highly paid profession, as is the leisure industry. So the task and the challenge for the council and the borough moving forward over the next decade plus is how do we move up that value curve? So that's why attracting and encouraging development at Central Park and encouraging other professional services developments to come into Darlington is important to us. I'm not going to turn any jobs away. Clearly, all jobs are important, but moving up that value chain is particularly important for the long-term prosperity of Darlington.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. My question sort of feeds also into what Councillor Body's talking about as well. Is the low wage, low skills equilibrium we've got ourselves into in Darlington, and it's around the the level 4 qualifications. We've got 55.4% people will require a level 4 qualification in the town, and it does concern me. I did raise this in Children and Young People's Scrutiny earlier in the week. One of the questions I'd like an answer to is, do we have an idea of how many employers are actually offering apprenticeships schemes for our young people, but more importantly, the higher apprenticeships, which will help to deliver against those level 4 qualifications that we need? We're not going to attract high-paying employers into the town unless we address this deficit, and it's been going on now for it's becoming a trend on the level 4, and I'm not aware of living wage employers within the town either. Majority of employers are paying minimum wage and above, unless they are specialised employers. So encouraging employers to become living wage employers as well. Thank you.
In turn, I don't have the level or the number of apprenticeship figure at fingertips, but I can get that for you. And certainly the work we're trying to do with the university in particular at Central Park, but more broadly across the area, is trying to get that level 4 up, because we know clearly we want to increase the number of level 4 qualifications, because that makes it more attractive for the business, and also we can retain some of our brighter people.
That's right, because you only have to go to, well, I mean, before COVID, you got the railway station or the routes out of town and see the amount of people who go out of town to work. And, a lot of those will be on because they're on a higher level, working higher level jobs, better paid jobs out of the area. And we need that money in the town, not out of the town.
Absolutely.
And I'm guilty of that as well, because I have to go out of town to work to get the salary that.
You're absolutely right, but I guess it's also a positive that those people with that disposable income choose to live in Darlington. So there's also a positive here.
And hopefully they spend their money back in Darlington.
I want both sides of the plate,
yes,
I'm afraid.
Well, so do I, yes. Yeah, I'd rather not commute out of town every day.
Councillor Harker.
Thank you. Firstly, could we have the slides that you used at the beginning, and also I presume it was a slide deck or something you were reading from in terms of the second set of figures that you were reading from? I'd wholeheartedly agree with you. It's in terms of there's lots of things a local authority can do, and I think some of the figures you showed probably are saying that by and large, Darlington, in terms of how its economy has shifted in the COVID sense, is probably not particularly different to many other places. I guess there'll be some statistics, there will be outliers, but broadly the picture I got is the impact in Darlington that there has been. Those figures are saying it's similar to other places. Bigger towns having different effects to smaller towns, etc. But by and large, I think what you're saying, what's happened here is not that different. I think there are some figures in there that I thought, and one of them I wrote down, the stats that you said that Tees Valley had done a survey of businesses, and I think if I've got the figures right, it was something like 83% of businesses are concerned about their next 3 months. Now, I'm not an economist, but what I read in the national media, if I was running a business, I'd be very scared over the next 3 months about what the economy is going to be doing, particularly as if it's almost certainly there'll be localised spikes, if not national spikes, in terms of COVID. 83% of businesses are saying they're concerned, and yet less than half are thinking they're going to have to lay off staff. Now, to me, those two figures just don't bear reality. One of them's got to be wrong. Either 83% of businesses are wrong in thinking they should be concerned, or there's far more of them should already be thinking about they're going to need to lay off staff in terms of making the business survive as a business. And I do wonder whether lots of businesses aren't facing up to what the reality may be in the next 3 months in terms of the economy. And I'm not being political here. I think the government has got a difficult choice. It's thrown shed loads of cash at businesses. We have a long discussion about whether that was done correctly, right, in the right way. But broadly speaking, loads of money thrown at the economy, and that's going to stop at some point. And I think there are already signs that the government, through the Chancellor, is suggesting that point in time is coming. And therefore, if and when COVID does return, unless that tap is turned on again, lots of those businesses that are now, the 83%, will either go to the wall or will have to shed lots and lots of staff. So I do think there is undue optimism, I think, about what's going to happen over the next 6 months, and we're not really being honest with ourselves about the impacts. And therefore, are businesses, our local authorities, prepared enough for those situations to come forward? And I think, an obvious example that I've read about this morning, government's having a big push about in office-based workforces to get back in the office, in part to help the local economies in terms of town centres to thrive. I know from my own personal perspective, my company is saying we're not looking to get people back in the office for 6 months, maybe a year. And the reports I'm seeing today is that there isn't a drive in terms of actually what's happening on the ground and people going back to the offices. So companies, people are saying, we don't think it's right, we're ignoring the government advice. And it's things like that. So what I'm saying is I think there's a discourse going on about government saying business has got to do lots of things, but the reality is businesses are not doing those things. And particularly today, I think one of the health experts is saying the rush back to the offices, perhaps at this point in time, is misjudged. And therefore, I suppose the question is do you think the situation is actually worse, or potentially will be worse than those figures are suggesting at the moment? Because collectively, we're not being honest about what's likely to happen over the next 3 to 6 months in terms of COVID and the consequences that will have to our businesses.
Whether I think the validity of the combined authority, those two figures you've quoted, whether there's an anomaly there, I don't know. I'm just merely responding to what that survey said. The information we have from our business investment contacts with our local business, we're not seeing or hearing from those businesses any major shocks. There will be some redundancies that emerge, but I'm not, from our major employers, I'm not hearing that the downsizing significantly or so, maybe proved wrong. Clearly, what I can say also, and not that it's the only hope we have, certainly not. But I do know that the Amazon facility in Darlington will about to go into a seasonal recruitment program. And of course, one of the things we have 52% of the Amazon workforce residing in Darlington postcodes. Now, obviously, as the facilities further north open up, in Bourburn and in Tyneside, one would expect that some of the staff here will locate up there. So there may be more opportunities for postcodes from Darlington to benefit from that Amazon expansion. There will also be other opportunities coming to Darlington. So it's hard to speculate, Steve. I wouldn't comment on the politics of the situation, other than to say that the contacts we've had with businesses would indicate, yes, they are concerned. Depends which sector you're in, but we're not anticipating major downsizing of our employment base. But it's all with a caveat is we just don't know.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Councillor Harker. Has anybody else got any questions? Okay. If I could just come in, Ian. Going back to what we've just been saying there about robustness of businesses, I spoke to a lot during lockdown and since, and it does appear, although not going to go back to the statistics from the TVCA, but it does appear to be a robustness in the major employers in the town, both during lockdown and coming out of it. Talked about there in terms of opportunities opening up elsewhere in the northeast. Now we're a net importer of employees, aren't we? And there is the potential there to be a natural migration of people who are coming into the town, moving out of the town, and then those opportunities. What I'm struggling to understand is that we've got. We talked about the skill shortages at level 4, and obviously we talked about GVA has been going up over time, and there's a skill shortage for professional staff. How would we bridge that gap? Because if there are, I think Councillor Hughes said, if there aren't the employers, then there aren't going to be the opportunities, and we're potentially as an authority, there's obviously a local plan, that's going to be going, and there's going to be growth there, and the types of houses that will be coming onto the market would generally be speaking for people who attract a certain salary. Is there the potential that we continue to lose income from the town?
I guess the answer to the last question, always yes. We live in a dynamic economy. People can move around, employees can move around. Our challenge is to make Darlington look as attractive for residents who want to live here. And I can say that Darlington is perceived, certainly in the south of the northeast, as a preferred destination. You just have to look at our housing build numbers across the area. So we are a net increaser of houses. And to answer your question, Councillor, it's not just the higher end houses we're building. Clearly, our overall assessment of need has indicated that we do need to build something like 30 to 40% of our annual stock as affordable and social. So, you know, it's that full range of housing, both from the either RSL or our own council build programme, right up to family houses and through beyond to executive homes. We need the full mix across a number of sites in Darlington. In terms of the employment side, I think I would agree with you. There is a robustness of opportunity. We've got to work hard at these higher value opportunities to get more people in, and there's no silver bullet for this skills issue. It's been going on for 20, 30 years. There has been billions of pounds invested by respective governments in the skills issue, and we still find ourselves where we are today. So there is a system issue here. So the only way, in my humble opinion, we crack it is to have the dialogue between the companies. They need to express what their needs are, what their wishes are, their desires are, and we have to marry that with the training providers, including the universities, the colleges, and the private sector training providers. There's got to be an honesty and an openness. For too long, might I add also, there has been sometimes a reluctance for companies to invest in training people. Thinking that individuals come, I quote, shovel ready with all the skills on day one to do the job. It's probably an unrealistic assumption. And over the decade that I've observed in economic development, there are some very good companies who spend a lot of time and energy and resource into upskilling people and training people and going on the journey, the long-term journey. But there are, sadly, across the patch and in the UK, there are still companies who don't do that and often cite issues with skills and gaps in the labour market. Maybe sometimes they need to have a hard look at what they're doing themselves. Now, there are some excellent companies out there and there are some not good companies out there. And I guess it's that whole system approach with part of the Tees Valley Skills strategy is to identify where we think the issues are, both in our current sectors and our future growth prospects, and try to get ahead of the curve so we've got the schemes ready and the people ready. So then companies who are looking to increase or maybe start in an area know they can get a ready supply of skills. So, for example, to illustrate, what we're trying to do with CPI and the Horizon Centre is to get the Tees Valley a production supply of biologics, bioscience type activities, the medical activities, so that we've got right from technical right up through to level 4 and level 5 type disciplines. So we've got the obvious.
I think he's frozen.
Yeah, frozen there, Ian. I thought Ian was coming back there.
Need to put 50p in the meter.
Shirley, is someone in contact with Ian?
Yeah, I'll just see if we can just get him to quickly switch across to his SIM card, see if that helps.
Thank you.
Darlington's broadband in some cases isn't fantastic in all areas, is it? I use my SIM card when I'm at home because it's better than my actual ADSL broadband.
Sorry, Councillor. I've had a power outage on my laptop, so I've had to flip onto my my workstation. So I do apologise.
Multi-device, love it.
It's a regular occurrence from working from home.
Do apologise.
Thank you, Ian. Can you remember where you were?
We were talking about, I was trying to illustrate what we're doing with Central Park and bioscience, biomedicine in terms of trying to get that honest, open dialogue with business. And we've got to marry the two together with the providers of skills. So there's, I guess, Councillor, there's no silver bullet. There's no easy solution here, but it's about people being open and honest about what they require, digging into their own pocket as well, but, driving the skills agenda collectively rather than asking or assuming other organisations are going to do it on their behalf.
Thank you, Ian. And just one last question, Ian. You went through the unemployment statistics. Do you have the statistics for the 49 and over bracket? I did have, and I do have, but as the PowerPoint has collapsed on my laptop, I can't access it. I can get that through to you, and I'll send the slides, councillors, through, so you've got the benefit of seeing the graphs and the slides. And the other document that Councillor Harker referred to it was an internal document my office has put together. Yeah. If you don't mind, Ian, I've just got Councillor Boddy who's just raised his hand.
I just wanted to say one very quick thing. I think the skills are out there and accessible, but they're in the sort of Darlington expat community. So many people have moved away and work in London and the southeast, but their parents are still here, their families are still here, and they can come back. And if we could try to address the skills gap that way, that may address some of the problems.
It's an interesting comment, Councillor Boddy. I think that was talked about earlier, wasn't it? In terms of the TVC, yeah, that's one of their targets. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ian. Really appreciate that. And as you said, if you're able to feedback those slides and the other bits of information, that would be fantastic.
Certainly will do.
Thank you. Right then, everyone. If we move on to agenda item number 8, which is to discuss the Greater Favourdale Birtree Garden Village Design Code. And I believe this is you as well, Ian, picking this up?
Yeah, I will. Firstly,
are you okay to do that now?
Yeah, certainly. If I can introduce the topic and what it's trying to do and what it isn't, and the fact that it's not on Cabinet this time isn't a problem, because clearly getting your views on this document is important. So what is it? This is a guide, an illustration on what we might want to see and achieve through our garden village at Birtree. It's not a supplementary planning document. It's there to advise and guide and pick up some of the principles we want the garden village to try to introduce and include in its development moving forward. It's there so it can support the development management process that ultimately will go to Councillor Jones's committee in fullness of time. It's not the finished document, so it was titled as a cabinet report in error. So I do apologise for that. But at this point in time in the cycle, very much welcome your input from councillors on the document. Some of the ambitions the document has, if there are any obvious challenges with that or omissions in that particular document. So that's the point of it, councillor. Really, it's an illustrative guide that shapes the future framework for development in the Birtree Garden Village. And of course, garden villages, the very nature that government introduced them was to try to create a distinctive, different feel and place, embracing good sustainable practice. So the report is the report. It's not going to Cabinet this month, and it may not go next month. It may be a while before it does, because there is still more work to be done. But it's there so councillors can see it, can contribute to it, and can help influence what the final document looks like.
Okay, thanks, Ian. I'd just like to open up the floor to questions or comments. Okay, I've got Councillor Tate.
Hello, thanks very much, Chair. It's not really a question, it's just probably comments or feedback in regards to the last planning committee. The new build project for the end of Neasham Road and the new development that's going to go on there. One thing that was highlighted was actually what the buildings themselves looks like. So to talk about that estate that's going to be built, there's going to be like 3 separate companies building. There's going to be 100 houses built by the council, 100 built by Esh, and the later third hasn't yet been decided. And just in regards to what the buildings themselves look like, it was commented at that committee that actually they need to be in harmony with each other, as opposed to the 100 that the council build look completely different to the 100 that are private.
Right. And were there any recommendations made to the committee to take back, or?
Yeah, the recommendations were that obviously there's to try and make it like a seamless design between the two.
Okay.
If I'm right, maybe Councillor Doris Jones will be able to confirm that. But what we said is we don't want to create a community which is going to have problems further down the line. So if you've got 100 social housing, which will be ours, the council stock, right next door, and in some cases maybe opposite streets, which will then look very different. Are we creating problems in regards to social?
Yeah. Don't know whether Councillor Jones wants to come in, but I can maybe respond that clearly is not the intention. We want to integrate where we can. I don't want also a Stepford Wives approach in Darlington. I think there's got to be a little bit of distinctiveness, but it's got to marry. So that's something that, given your concern, Councillor State, I'll go back to Dave Coates and colleagues and examine that issue in particular, because the last thing I want is to have a housing site which is supposed to be an integrated housing site looking like 3 discrete different blocks. That's not what the intention is. So if it looks like that, that's something where I'll talk to Dave and colleagues about. But that is certainly not the intention. We want to integrate this. We want to make it feel like one good quality residential development.
Yeah, and just as an example of where it's worked quite well recently is the carbon development up at Springfield. So we've got some council houses in there alongside private and some rent to buy schemes. Now all the houses look the same, so it's sort of really integrated very well. I've got a friend that already lives in one of them. Her parents have got one of the properties through the council there, and there's absolutely no different like sort of housing where you'd be able to point out and say, oh, that's a council property.
Point well made. What I will say in defence of the council is the quality and aesthetic appearance of the new builds is very good. But if there's more we can do to make that blend, I'm sure we will. But certainly, if you look at some of the council stock that we've built the last few years, it compares very favourably aesthetically to a number of private developments. But I take your point on board, Councillor Tate, and I'll talk to my colleagues.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones, if you just want to come in.
There's not a lot more I can add actually to what Ian said. I think that's more or less what was said by Dave in the meeting. And at the end of the day, it's buyer's choice, isn't it? If they don't want to live next to council houses, they're not going to buy next to council houses. And the design will reflect the cost and so forth on that as well. So, thank you, Ian. But that is exactly what was explained in planning. And Dave will explain that to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. There's just one question, but I think obviously because this is now being pulled from Cabinet, Ian, and you said that it may not go to the next Cabinet?
No, with this work got to be done further in refining this document. It is a draft, and we also need to share it with Homes England and with Helen's. And give our own views, because we may well be a developer on the site ourselves. Okay.
So I think it would be best. Councillor Harker, you put your hand up. You're on mute, Councillor Harker. Are you not? Okay. Councillor Harker, did you want to come in? No, guess not. what probably be an idea is we obviously, this report comes back to scrutiny in its final form, so we're able to digest it at that point. But there is one question I would like to ask Ian, and it obviously it'll reflect this development, but then also others. And Councillor Tate picked up on it before. On page 34, it talks about obviously waste recycling and utilities. And it mentions that high-speed, ultra-fast gigabit broadband connectivity must be a feature of the development to encourage a live-work balance. Now, I'm assuming, obviously, once this design code is adopted, it's a design code for the whole of the town.
Not necessarily. Doesn't have to be. If Cabinet so decide that it wants to adopt a design code for all of the town, it can do. As I said before in the preface, this is not a supplementary planning document. This is a set of principles that we want to consider as part of the development of Bertree of the Garden Village. So the intention of this was just for the Garden Village rather than rolling it out across all development across the town. What we need to consider, Councillor, as well is what the implications financially are with this as well. So it's, you know, if you're rolling out a Rolls Royce is expensive. So you've got to get that balance between affordability, good quality design. But the principle behind this was for Garden Village, and it's so we could help shape what that could look like moving forward. It was not the intention to roll this out as an SPT and to then impact all developments in future in Darlington.
No. Yeah, totally appreciate that. But I think it's obviously something that's hopefully we can discuss as part of the work plan as well. Because broadband connectivity is a major issue as part of the town. So just one final question as well. Could there just be, for members, maybe an explanation for Appendix 5 and what the REBA 2030 challenge is? And I appreciate you may not be able to answer that at this meeting, but...
Annex 5, right. Have a look.
Yeah, Appendix 5, it's the REBA 2030 challenge target. Page 45 of 57.
That's better, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
I'm going to have to come back to you, Chair, on that one.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah.
And we've now got some more hands gone up. So Councillor Boddy and then Councillor Tate.
Hi, can I just make the observation, really? I'm sorry it's so late to the party when you look at the design work that's already gone into this, but it's just a casual observation. The market for bungalows, particularly two-bedroom bungalows, a small semi-detached two-bedroom bungalows, remains buoyant in the local economy. I understand the thinking behind building a lot of new houses. If you build the houses, people will come. But for the market as it stands, there's a great shortage, and there's always been a very buoyant demand for bungalows in town. I can't explain that. It's just a fact of Darlington, and we are very short of two-bedroom semi-detached bungalows in the housing stock. So if that's just something to bear in mind when designing new developments, I think. And the other thing is, it was a great pity. It was an awful shame when the Parker Morris standards were abolished in 1981. And there are concerns in my mind about build quality of new houses.
Okay, comment noted, Councillor Boddy. Councillor Tate.
Hello, thanks very much, Chair. It was just a follow-up in regards to your point made around about fibre and connectivity. I know that for the development that was passed at Neasham Road, there was an amendment put through which was accepted to ensure that even if the services wasn't available for high-speed fibre connectivity, that the ducts were laid during the development phase. And that's really just to mitigate moving into a new property to then find your street being dug up 6 months later because they're upgrading the services. So that was put through, and Doris will be able to confirm that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. Okay, as I said, I think if we're able to bring this back to the Scrutiny Committee as and when it's in its final form, that'd be fantastic. Right, thank you very much, Ian. If we move on to agenda item number 9, which is an update on the investment fund, and if I could just hand over to Elizabeth Davidson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Okay, so this is the annual investment fund update report. Members will be aware that we've got a £50 million investment fund that we can recycle through. To date, we've had 10 uses of the fund. 2 of those have already been repaid. So we currently have 8 live projects, which can be seen in the table there. I'll just quickly go through them, give you a heads up on some of them. So market asset management, or the loan said that there was £1.8 million that they could utilise. To date, they haven't drawn down a significant proportion of that, and I know it's been quite high profile. It was impacted by COVID, some of the build, but I know it's now back on track, and I think that the roof works have started, and I know Ian's still on the call there, he'll be able to confirm that we're anticipating starting the main refurb works at the beginning of 2021. So I think that one's back on track now. We've then got the Nishan Road linked to Cattle Mart. And actually our cabinet next week, members might have seen some of the papers. There is a large paper on how that development, and I know it's just been talked about today as well, will move forward as well. But the loan here was for the initial purchase of the Nishan Road land. And the paper that will come to cabinet now will show how that will all be repaid through the build out. Feetham's House, there was a slight delay in project on Feetham's House just because of COVID and the stopping of building works. However, I believe we're now doing an office fit out for Deep Ocean at the moment, and they're anticipated, or that should be completed in the next few months. I know there's also another couple of interested parties. I believe one's about to sign as well. So I think despite the situation and the COVID situation, that's still progressing with regard to Feetham's House. The next ones we have are our joint ventures. West Park is still in very early stages. I think it's a 7-year programme, but I know the roads are all in now. And actually, despite the fact that there's no houses there, I think they've actually sold it. Well, it's more than the report says now, actually, but they've already had 19 plots. I think it's more like 22 have already been reserved on that site. Hyington is nearing finishing. They've already, or the JV's paid back 1.7 million, and we're anticipating by the end of the year the full loan will have been paid back on that. That one doesn't seem to have been affected at all by COVID, actually. And the build out will remain the same, and certainly the profit anticipated from there remains the same. Middleton St George has been slightly affected, and some of the house building will move back into 2021. That hasn't affected the profitability and what the council will receive back, because on the houses that have been sold, they're still hitting the margins. It's just a cash flow issue, so that will be moved back into next year. And then finally, one with regard to the JV is the one that was agreed this year. Now, this is the SDBC, which primarily is speculative development, but primarily outside the borough of Darlington. Again, obviously very early stages, and this is a 7 to 10 year recycling JV, as we would call it. But I know that they have bought their first site up in Gateshead, a place called Springwell, and obviously that will be going through due process now. Finally, land acquisition at Faverdale went through in March this year, and that is a part of our long-term strategy for open up development. That was a quick run through, so just happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Again, I'll open it up to the floor. Has anybody got any questions? I've got Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question in regards to Feetham's House. Sorry, what's the percentage of space being occupied by Deep Ocean?
I'm sorry, Chair, I don't know that, but Ian might know.
Top. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Top floor, Councillor Tate. So it's around 5,000 square feet. And the other interested party is likely to take half a floor, and they were at head of terms with that other interested party.
And how many floors does it have, please, Ian?
5.
5. So one floor is currently occupied.
There'll be 3.5, assuming this other head of term complete. There'll be 1.5 floors fully let.
Right. Okay. Thanks so much.
Councillor Harker.
Thank you. The fund now is part of our MTFP, in that we rely on the income that we're getting it to fund our revenue stream. And the question's been asked in that context. I know the money isn't at risk in terms of the way the packages are put together, but in terms of cash flow as a consequence of COVID, are we likely to see this income coming in much later? And is there a consequential impact on our revenue, even if it's in the short term? And is that another pressure that we may have to manage over a period of time until things either return to normal or till that money starts coming back in? And specifically in the instance of Feetham's House, it hints there that there will be delays because of COVID. Do we have a timetable of when we expect those occupiers to come in, and hence some of the revenue start to come back that we paid up front for those schemes?
I think with regard to the overall question, the one I've got, there's two. There's the Feetham's House, and then the other one I mentioned, the Middleton St George joint venture. The cash flow on that, we're talking about £50,000,
right,
which for our cash flow, it's not a big problem because we're actually cash rich at the moment, believe it or not. So I'm not concerned about that. On Feetham's House, I think it was about a 3-month delay, I believe, from the start of the fit out on what was anticipated. So again, as you'll appreciate, the finance officer is very prudent anyway. So we had assumed on the actual cash flow coming in on Feetham's House that we've got a big long void period put into it anyway. So again, I'm not concerned about the cash flow on the delay with regard to COVID. What we just need to keep our eye on is the further floors being occupied, albeit that we didn't anticipate them to be occupied this year anyway. But I'm sure Ian can come up on that if there's anything else.
Chair, yes, just to remind members as well that the funding for Feetham's House, it's a shared initiative with Combined Authority. So we are taking risk, obviously, but that risk is being shared with the Combined Authority. And as Elizabeth rightly pointed out, we did factor in a 2 to 3 year period before it would be fully occupied. And there is good continuity built into that plan. But of course, with COVID coming, it's now something else to keep a close eye on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. Has anybody else got any questions? Councillor Tate, who wants to come back in?
Hi, sorry, just another question for Ian. It's a follow-up in regards to Deep Ocean and moving into Feetham's House. Are they moving out of their Connors Cliff offices?
That will be the intention, yes.
Okay. So that becomes empty space up that end of town, yeah?
And the private sector owner of that is currently marketing that facility as we speak.
Thank you.
Just one question following on from that. It just seems to be a focus on Feetham's House, but in terms of the remaining space, how many people do we expect that to be occupied by? It's a rough idea based on the square footage. I know it depends on what the layout is, but
I'll come back to that one, Elizabeth. We anticipate, it depends what the layout is, but we anticipate on 5,000 square feet floor, we think the whole building could accommodate 350 people. There will, for example, Deep Ocean, we think there'll be something in the order of 60 to 70 people potentially occupying that floor. There will be agile working. We've talked about earlier in the meeting. Not all will be in the office. Councillor, it'll be around that level, we believe. The other thing I should have said as well is the funding formula for the Feetham's House also attracted ERDF funding. So again, we got something like £2 million of grant from Europe to also contribute towards the construction. Now, with that brings all the challenges with the RDF. For example, is a number of the floors have to be retained and used by SMEs. Now, Deep Ocean are not an SME, so Deep Ocean in occupying the top floor means that of the remaining floors, because of the ERDF stipulation, we have to target the building at SMEs. If we attract a multinational or a large company, it's our decision then as to whether or not we decide to allow that large company in the building and forsake the ERDF, i.e. repair the ERDF. But that will be a commercial transaction discussion at the time, should we ever get that position.
Okay. And sorry, Ian, what was the value of the grant?
2.1 million ERDF. And the remaining costs were split between the council and the combined authority.
Combined authority. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you, Ian. Has anybody else got any questions? Okay. Oh, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you, Ian. Okay. Right. If we then move on to agenda item number 10, which is the work programme. And Shirley, if you want to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's the usual work programme report that's on your agenda. Appendix 1 sets out some of the topics and the dates that you've asked for information to come back to the Scrutiny Committee. Some members are just asked to consider Appendix 1, to review it and to see if there's anything else that they would like to add on to the agenda. Bearing in mind that if we do add into the agenda items, we probably would need to have a quad of aims completed, so officers realise and know what actually members are looking for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just open the floor. Does anybody want to make any comments? Okay. Just make sure. Right. If I could maybe ask, I don't know if this is bring you in on this, Ian. Broadband infrastructure, Darlington 2012 to 2020. Do we have any idea when that is going to be programmed in?
Yes, the challenge with broadband, whilst we have most of the urban core has got broadband coverage, the main coverage issues are in the rural areas. We have a partnership via the Combined Authority with Digital Durham, and indeed we are waiting or seeking clarity from Digital Durham and BT, the provider, as to when the more difficult, more challenging rural areas will be connected. Suffice to say that getting information out of that programme on a timeline and which areas are covered and which areas are not remains a challenge. And I have written to, the leader of the council has written to the mayor and also to Digital Durham to ask for more clarity on when that programme will be delivered. One further point, Councillor Durham, the newer estates that are being built has been commented on today, generally will have the ducts and the facilities and the infrastructure enabled. Some of the challenges we've had in some of our, shall we say, urban areas where coverage is not great is because in effect you have to retrofit and you have to do it after the event, which is not what we do on all new developments going forward. So one would hope there'll be less instances going forward than we currently had in Darlington. However, getting the private sector to do the infrastructure, they have to pass commercial tests, and sometimes the particular schemes don't justify that investment by the private sector. That's why the publicly funded programme was put in place. I'm sharing some of my frustrations that I've also voiced in full council on a number of occasions. We continue to press, and we will do so through Combined Authority. But I know that Councillor Keir is now taking it upon himself to to lead a parallel charge on this one, so we get full visibility on what the rollout programme could look like, is going to look like, and therefore the bits that are not going to be done, what technology can we deploy in those areas, utilising other forms of public finance if it's available to make that happen. Long-winded answer, Councillor Durham,
No.
but we are pressing for it, but we are struggling to get absolute clarity, I'm afraid.
Okay. I think what it would be great for members if we just have an understanding of what the coverage is within the town at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be great if that could be circulated to members.
I can bring that back to another committee meeting.
Thank you.
Or would you rather just be circulated, Councillor?
I think it's circulated. Then we can digest it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do.
Then we can digest that. So Ian, the economic strategy and the housing strategy.
Right. Are we talking? What do you want to do, Councillor? Refresh the economic strategy?
Yeah, no, it's obviously it's been looking at to scrutinise the strategic action plan.
Okay.
You know, does that need to be refreshed at this moment in time?
Well, post-COVID, probably it's sensible to take a look in terms of looking at the relevance of that moving forward. So I'm happy for a piece of work to come back to inform committee and to take guidance and advice from you.
Thank you. That would be appreciated.
I think in terms of housing strategy, clearly we have the local plan. Yeah. I don't necessarily think we need to look at that just at this point in time.
No. Okay. I've got Councillor Doris Jones and then Councillor Harker. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's really just in regards to what Ian said regarding the broadband. There are so many people out in the rural areas who are having to work from home because of the obvious things. A lot of people working from the town hall are having to work from home, and we're having dreadful connectivity problems, and it is affecting many people's ability to be able to work from home. I can't stress that strongly enough, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Harker.
Thank you. It's just to ask some clarity around the climate change subgroup. I understand that they've had a letter from the leader indicating that that group will meet less frequently and have a monitoring role of the council's work on climate change. So the question really was, I'm not clear now in terms of scrutiny of that work that's been done, where that will now sit. Is that still with that body? Will it come to this committee? What is the role of that group more widely?
No. I think that's a good question, Councillor Harker, and to be honest, I haven't been kept in the loop on that. So thanks for raising that. It's something I'll look into.
Thank you, because there is lack of clarity, and I think we just need to understand who's going to be doing what in that nature, in that respect.
Agreed.
Thanks.
Councillor Tay.
Hello, thanks, Chair. It's just to come in on the back of Councillor Harker's comment or feedback there. I've had that letter from the leader, which you were copied into yourself, and obviously I think it's quite clear that the responsibility of climate change is now going to sit with cabinet members. Each cabinet member will be responsible for their respective area. I think reading that letter itself, it does state that the group might meet once every quarter. But in regards to the resolution that was signed by the council last year, I think the position we've moved to now is a better way to be able to progress that work that's been started. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Tate. Okay. So at this moment in time, we're not proposing any changes to the work plan. What I would like to do is obviously we are going to receive a briefing on the Towns Fund. What I'd like to do is to get the committee members together, if possible, after that, where we can discuss where we may take any future work along that subject line. The other thing which I've asked Shirley to arrange is a briefing from Anthony Sandys on the process that's followed in terms of collection of council tax, housing, rents and non-domestic business rates. because of obviously, you know, the horse has bolted, so to speak, and I think it would be proactive of committee members to understand what the process is, so we're able to feed back any recommendations or comments to Cabinet. Okay, and the other thing which I will be wanting to speak to each individual committee member about, and it's just because you're the eyes and ears in terms of your wards, is a piece of work which we may look to bring forward to this committee, which is looking at empty properties within the borough and how the council interacts with the owners of those properties and how we potentially bring those back into use. So I'll try and catch up with each and every one of you individually by phone. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Any supplementary items?
Sorry, Chair, you've got Councillor Body.
So, Councillor Body, apologies.
That's okay. It's just a comment really I wanted to make about an earlier item. I wasn't quite sure where it fitted in. It's obviously a matter for market asset management how the work programme progresses on the market hall, but there's been a lot of bad publicity lately about biomass and how biomass is actually practically burned in heating systems, and sometimes there's been some suggestion that it has to be burnt with other very environmentally unfriendly items to get it to actually light, and I wonder if we could just keep a watching brief on that and how that's going to really operate for the covered market.
Okay, yeah, that'll be noted. Working in that industry, or previously working in that industry, I know how things work, and it's safe. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. I'll make a note of that. Okay, jumping back. So we're all happy to continue with the work programme, apart from the suggestions that I've laid out. You just have a quick show of hands on that. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 11. Any supplementary items? I haven't got any. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Jones?
Yeah, if I may, perhaps I should have brought this up right at the beginning on the complaints and so forth, but I'm reading a lot here about how easy it is for people to complain. They can do it online, they can do it on the telephone, wherever. But my concern is there's nothing in here to say our young people, children, who are frightened to do all of these things, might not want, they may be suffering a problem either at home or at school or outside, can't talk to anybody. Is there not a way of either a box in the school where they can seal an envelope and it can then get posted to the town hall to help them with the problems that they have? And can we monitor if we do have a problem? Because personally, I've had to deal with one myself, and it's only because I picked it up myself that a child could talk. I know the schools are very good and well trained and know exactly what they're looking for if there's a child in a problem. But sometimes it's nothing to do with school. It could be to do with home. Is there anything, Ian, that we can tap into that? Because social services don't get it. They don't know about it. And, you know, it's just a thought. I might be totally out of order here, but when we're talking about complaints, I'm thinking, why doesn't this kid know that he can go here, or he can write this letter, and he can, you know, do these things? And not all of them know how to write a letter, sadly.
I think it's a valid point you raise. It's how we enact it and capture it and encourage it. I don't know the answer at the top of my head, but yeah. I would have thought the school's entry point would be the most logical one. But you know, if I take that away, Councillor, and talk to my colleagues who know far better than I do on that subject.
I'm quite sure there's something, Chair, but I just would like to know for myself what, because I've never been on social services scrutiny.
Yeah. Could we feed that that question into Councillor Clark, the cabinet member, as well, please, Doris?
Yeah, fine. Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Councillor T. No, you still got your hand up?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to take it down. So apologies.
Right. Okay. If no more questions, then all I can say is thank you very much for everybody for attending this morning's meeting. I hope everyone's safe and well, and hopefully we'll see each other face to face pretty soon.